Well, welcome again this morning. This session is more about just a discussion on statistics. I'm, I know statistics are a common thing that people overlook, but a lot of managers are looking for statistics. And this is more along the lines of addressing where you can find statistics that you may not have thought about and why you need to look at stats. I deal with statistics every day with my current customer because he doesn't have time to run searches or anything like that, or to gather that information. And a lot of my searches are basically on a performance side. I look at forms to see how many of these remedy forms have over 1 million records in them, because then I have to start looking at performance, especially in Smart IT when you have the on the dashboard on the left-hand side of all those activity notifications that you're getting and so forth. That thing grew in our environment. We didn't know it with all these needs attentions and things like that. And it was tapping over 1.3 million records. And we didn't see a significant slowdown. But then as soon as I mentioned how many records we had, then my project manager for the customer said, well, I have noticed it slowed down a little bit. I can tell the slowness of it. So I removed the records, and now he can see how faster it is. But you don't see it if it's a gradual slowness in performance. So again, statistics is a key. So that's why I'm presenting. I thought I was presenting my slide. Try this again. Hold on a second. Not sure why. There we go. It should be recording up in the top. Okay, so I'm going to go back to the beginning. Sorry about that, but statistics again is basically what everybody needs to focus on. So I'm going to address some of these areas that I tend to look at and so forth. And again, I just found this on the website, grabbed it. I kind of like the image of statistics, where it's how it's interpreted, how value it is, how detailed, how people can use it. So it kind of bundles these statistics all into a central point. Now, for this session, it's more along the lines of explaining what is statistics, and then looking more into the remedy helix side as far as where you can pull out certain ones. Now, again, you can pull out stats from any form within remedy. It's just basically what you're looking for. You could also have hidden statistics that you may not even know about or aware of within the helix environment that could be helpful. And I like to dig around, especially when I have more time on my hands, when I get all their tickets out of the way. I can start digging around for more information, more statistics, because I like statistics to give it to my boss, because that's what helps. So in this case here, this is where statistics is really all about a single measurement. We're looking at a measurement of a particular in-game. How many of you use service level management or service targets? Service targets are your measurement. You're measuring something. You're looking at some point or other. I view service targets in the action of basically triggering something right at the launching of a ticket, because somebody wants to be aware of something. So the statistic in that case is at 0% launching. Okay, so that's where you get that statistical functionality. In here, if you look at the statistical chart, you can look at my customer. This is from the results. You can see where they're busy by looking at the stats. Their support staff is very busy between Monday through Friday. The goal is to look to see where are they at the peak points. How many of you remember the performance tuning and troubleshooting class we used to give at the Remedy Corporation and BMC training session? We talked about these statistics to look at what is the point of where majority of your users as well as your workflow is tapping into the system. That's where you want to find those peak performance time periods, so you do not run other things during that time period. Like on our system, we have LDAP that runs at 9 o'clock in the morning. But I also have a ton of people now coming in between 8 and 9. They're late arrivals. I'm used to going in at 6 o'clock, but now they're coming in at 8 o'clock. So those are my peak hours where I know I cannot go in and flush out the cache on Smart IT. I know I can't go in and do the mid-tier and flush out the mid-tier in that aspect, because I usually do that. So on my production, I have to find the right time to do it. When my boss says you got to fix it, then I'll fix it, but then let them know when those time periods will go. So I'm looking at the statistics, and I can see where the majority of the work is coming in from my customer side. So when you're using statistics, your boss may or may not be pounding you like mine does. Always looking for notifications, always looking for some assistance and things like that. So what you want to look for is, like in my case, my boss is happy with me because I look at performance. I look at the system to see when something happens on the statistical aspect of it. Okay. So in this case here, I'm looking for an increase or decrease in performance. I'm looking for an increase in forms and total data, because that could decrease the form designator as well. I'm looking for utilization of the forms and seeing who's using that functionality. I'm looking at the user performance. And when I say user performance, I'm talking about more along the lines of how long does it take them to fill out an incident ticket? You have that reported date versus the create date or submit date. You can look at that clock there to see the difference of how long are they on the call with somebody. And then you go in and say, all right, well, how long did it take them to resolve the ticket or close it? Now, personally, me, resolve, does that really mean the ticket's closed? Technically, no, because they can still work on it. They could reopen it. But a lot of people classify as when it's resolved, the agent is done with it. They don't want to deal with any of that information or anything like that. Okay. The customer check on the customer support functionality. This is where you're looking at if the customer is not happy with the service that you're getting. Like I can tell 4 people were not happy on Tuesday night because they ordered drinks, and guess what they did? They left without getting their drinks. So that's customer satisfaction. That's statistics. I had 4 people leave. And so I brought that to the attention of the hotel saying, we can't have that. And of course, last night, the gentleman was very, very attentive, faster, had things done. They redid things. So that statistic helped us here to fix an issue. Of course, it also helped that we only had 18 people instead of 35 that showed up too. So a little bit better in that aspect too. So you want to look at customer perspective as well. So one of the things, I know this is old school. I know this is the service request definition form of SRM, but in the bottom left-hand corner of your SRD, you can see the frequency. My customer on the left-hand side has a service request that's used a number of times. And in this case, on the left one, I know everybody is using this because it's already being used like 16, 17,000 times in that time period of the request frequency. And when it was last picked up, where on the other side, I look over here and I see the last time that somebody even touched a work order was in 2010. So guess what I can do with that service? Get rid of it. Why do I need it? So I'm looking at statistics from that perspective. Can you do statistics in DWP? Yes. And you can find out if the service catalog is worthwhile. A lot of people don't think that. You build it, but are they using it? If they're not going to use it, get rid of it. Move it to something else in that capacity. I look at how many tickets are coming directly to my group. I get tired of those, but my boss doesn't want me to change it. I get a lot of notifications of tickets assigned to me to reboot somebody's machine or change somebody's salary. Because why? Where's the statistic? Why am I getting all of these tickets? It's because they don't know what the service is that they need. So can I improve the service? Yeah, I can improve it. I can improve that functionality, but my boss wants to keep it simple. All they get is one request. But then when they look at the templates, it's not simple. And that's what I try to get across to them. So you're looking at that in a business decision. What do I need to do? So in this case, I have a ton of service requests. Everything's all in 3 fields that they select. But I think the best way would be is to split them up. Send them to administration, to accounting, to shipping. Don't let them try to pick what it is through the drop down because they're not always picking the right one. This one is more on a service target structure. I don't know if you can actually see the times. I put the information on the left-hand side. One of them is dealing with service targets at a critical priority. I only have 6 records on critical tickets. Is that enough to really gain any business decisions that you can do? Is that accurate information? So the number of records you have in your statistic also plays a factor. Where on the low priority, I have plenty of records. I have 208 or 484 records, but a 58% satisfaction rate. So now I can take it to my boss and say, you got people that are not closing out their tickets in time. But he could actually see that if you looked at it, see the SLMs are all red because they're not matching. They don't care about the service level agreements. So my case is why even have it if you don't care about it, is the whole thing. But again, it still comes to the stats. The statistic in this aspect is where I send the manager a daily report on how many tickets are open by an individual. So how many of you would be embarrassed if your manager showed this up and you had 180 records open and everybody else is sitting with 3 or 4? It's like, yeah, I'm number 1. But yeah, why are you number 1? I want to know why is you so hot? Okay. I had an individual that, I don't know if you know about ticket reassignment for round robin happens and so forth. A guy basically stood up and couldn't understand why he was never getting a ticket assigned to him automatically. He didn't understand on the stats is whenever somebody assigns you the ticket, you go back to the bottom of the list. So you never get automated. So you might want to tell people quit assigning tickets to you and go from that point. So you have to look at the statistics in that aspect. So I do this for a manager because they're trying to get on their support groups to do better work. Because if they do better work, then the service targets will go away. And this was a client that I worked with before on the nuclear laboratory. Some other pros when you're dealing with statistics. Statistics is numbers. You're not gathering 5,000 records. You're gathering a count of those 5,000 records. So you don't really have to look at the records. You just have to look at the count, the total. What are the end result in that aspect? Patterns can be detected. I know in that performance tuning class we used to teach you to draw it out. I know you're not mapping. I know you're not building charts to say, oh, today it was 500. There it is. Here's another one. But we have charts and reporting. How many of you run performance charts to see the scalability of your tickets and see how it continues to climb? That's where you can look at it as patterns are being detected in that aspect. A comparison of variables between a set time period. You can see what one group is doing during a certain time period while another group. The report I put out for the WAN team, they want to know how many tickets are we processing in the first 4 hours of the morning and how many tickets are we processing in the afternoon. And then how many tickets do we process altogether? So the guy wants statistics, but he also wants to know each individual that's touching the record. So if they touched one record 5 times, that's a stat. One record got touched 5 times, but his stat is 5 changes were made. Not 5 tickets, but 5 changes were made. So that's what he doesn't care about how many tickets he has. He cares about how many times did they work on that functionality. And his requirement is they have to put something in the activity log, even if they opened it up to look at it, to say that they acknowledge it. So it could be fattening the numbers, but that can happen. Talked about performance. Some people love stats. How many of you love statistics? Everybody love numbers? I do. NFL fantasy tonight starts another week again. Numbers are up. So I'm always on the stats. So the biggest question though is your data valid to give you the right statistics? You have to look at that. So I found this article where an instructor in a college found this. They call it onion articles. I don't know if you ever heard of onion articles. They're fabricated news reports and things like that. And he brought it up to his class, and the class got confused. So now he no longer references news reports, or as he calls them, onion articles, because he cannot verify the information that's being provided to him. Okay. So when I was in the military, we had a lot of facts because I was in the intel side. And you'd listen to the news reports coming out, and all you wanted to do is that's wrong. But we were not allowed to say that. Okay. Because we knew what it was in that aspect. So again, you have to look at the data? Can you trust that data? Can you look at it? Are the users following the process? And that what I want to really get across to you is to find a business process and enforce that onto all the users to make sure they follow the same process to make it happen. Okay, cons of using statistics. The data can be misinterpreted, and that is the number of records you have is big flown. I know that in service level management, you can do service targets, then you can have service level agreements, and then you can have contracts. The service level agreement can package a certain number of service targets for you in that capacity. So now you're looking at the comparison. I want to know what we're doing in the priority of low, medium, high, and critical versus I want to know how we're doing overall in all four of those stats. So that's where you got to look at. It can be misinterpreted that we're at 95%, but critical is 100%. So that's where you got to look at the interpretation capability. Okay, statistic data can be manipulated. And this is, again, where people can go in and stop the service target from running by putting it in pending. And then now my boss wants me to put it to resolved. And it's like, well, they had to work on it while it was pending, didn't they? Should they put it back into in progress, or should I put it back to assign to somebody else and start the clock again? Because you're working on it. So you're really not getting a true status, a statistical result if you're going from pending to resolved. Because now you're not getting the clock to start again, and you're not getting that information that comes across that perspective. And I'll show you that here, coming up here. Other things, it's kind of hard to verify the data as far as what you're looking for. So you want to look at maybe auto-generated stats, like reported date, submit date, resolve date. These are reported information that gets stamped that the user doesn't touch. They don't realize that capability. But once they find out things like putting it into pending and knowing that that affects the counting of the clock itself, that does have an effect. But there are some hidden ones that can be calculated as far as the amount of time that they worked on the ticket will still get calculated, and they're not aware of that because it's not in Smart IT. Has anybody seen that assignment log in Smart IT, the HPD's assignment log in Smart IT? Is it in there? Do you have a click on a link to say, hey, I've worked on this for 15 minutes? No, as far as I know, it's back on ITSM side, but it's still calculated. Time is still going as it is. It's hard to access and check the data because the primary data is not accessible to you. It's accessible to me. So I'm putting out all this information, but when he runs it, he doesn't get all the data. So that was another con that we had. And it can be time consuming, especially if you're running a calculation against millions of records. So some of the things I want you to think about in the data is your process. My customer today does not use the product categories. So there are reports on product categories. He's big on opcats. We utilize opcats to our heart's desire, but they were not getting populated correctly, and they're getting changed by his technicians. So now my requirement every day is to look to see it. Is there any tier 3, tier 2, tier 1s that have been blanked out by an agent? Not many, but I usually get during a month, I get about 20 to 25 records that are cleared out because they're changing it because they don't like what it is, but they don't understand the process. They're not supposed to change it. It's supposed to stay the way it was. So now you may ask, well, how do I know what it was? I have 3 custom fields in the background that get auto-populated that they don't see. So I just look at those 3, move it into the opcat, and go from there. Now you may say, well, why don't I build workflow? I don't have time. On that one, it is on my schedule to do. So I just do a manual process. So you got to look at the process and how they do that functionality. Just to give you a little insight, I told you I love stats. This is my statistical spreadsheet. I walk every morning. I run as much as I can. And I also keep track of my count every day of how many steps or how many miles. I looked at it as miles or just 2. I didn't like the stat because I only ran 2 miles. That didn't look good. So I said, let's cut it to quarter miles. I like the number 8 better than the number 2. Okay. So this is my statistic. I even walk and I find money. I found the $1.25 this morning. And I add that up. So I add it to here, and I've already found almost $2,000 over an 8-year period on the ground. penny here, penny there, it builds up. So that's my statistic in that capacity. So just showing you, I love stats, just like your boss would. And I got a Fitbit, and my Fitbit tracks my steps. I'm already up to 39 million steps. So kind of proud of that. Doesn't help me on my weight, but I'm kind of proud of it. That's a different story. Okay, so let's look at Helix as far as when you're looking at statistics. One of the things that they provide to you is the statistics on Smart IT's ticket console. So you can run a filter process to get the stats across the top of what you're looking at. How many tickets in that filter that you did? So if you look on the first one, I ran a filter, I have 36 open tickets. On the second one I did, I have 2,275 tickets, but you're only looking at 80 at any one time. And you're only getting those that are 30 days open. It'll still calculate how many are open regardless, but you're only going to get those tickets that are open for the last 30 days. So again, you're getting the stats. My customer didn't like the hiding of the stats. He likes to see the stats. His agents like to see the stats. So I had to activate that parameter to show the stats. So this is a statistical point. They're looking at how many tickets they need to have. So it is not a report, but it is something that's giving them something to do with the business process. In smart reporting, you also have statistics based on the permissions that they get, so they can run whatever report that's in here until they get rid of it in April. I still use this as my statistical count, and that's where I can look and see how many records in CTM people have been modified without me having to do the search. So it sends me a report every morning, and I still see the number of records are over just under 2,000 records now that they've updated that they need to still modify. So I'm tracking when they're making these Active Directory changes until it's completed. So now I'm monitoring their system since I don't have that access. And of course, you have your charts that are available that you can get from Smart Reporting, that out of dashboard reports, as well as whatever reports that they have different charts on, which now BMC Dashboard will provide that for you as well. One of the questions we were talking about last night was in Smart IT on the dashboard. Those are smart reporting dashboards. What's going to happen with BMC Dashboard comes in? Are they going to replace those dashboard reports in Smart IT with the new BMC Dashboard? We never got the answer. So that's something that we're looking for. Other things that you can look for in reporting is you're doing out of the box custom reports, looking at chart data, whatever's happening in this capacity. I basically am running the OpCat report since that's what we have. My ProdCats don't work because I have no data. So I always have to run this to see what the stats are. And I look to see if there's significant changes. If there's significant changes, that just tells me that either people are pulling in different services or they're changing the OpCats. And then I go and do my search to fix it. Old school. Anybody still use the ITSM mid-tier? Do the split window and you get all these reports that are in here, the charts that come up, which are flashboard reports or displays. It is a view. I know that the LJ's not here, but he was trying to tell me it was a view. Yeah, I know it's a view, but it's putting in a flashboard report in. So it's again, data that you're getting statistics on, but is it really the right statistics you want? And the answer to me is no, because it's not giving my group, it's giving me the company stuff. And I don't really care to see those. One of the reports that's going away is the mid-tier functionality with BERT, but I still use it. I like it because I can do a search, highlight all the records, and send it over. Unfortunately, it's only 1,000 records at the max, but if I have 15,000, I'll do 15 different searches and dump it into spreadsheets and merge them in. Why? Because I do not have permission to change the setting from 1,000 in chunking to whatever. Oh, those were the great days, Mike. So again, all looking at the statistics and the results that you get from this. And with BERT, you do have some chart capability as well. That's provided to you. Another one is this performance functionality where I go into the AO System Server Group dashboard and I look at the stats. And when I look at application pending load and I see 587, what do you think's happening? Something is happening. It's a process that's happening. And usually when I click on it to see it, it's the smart reporting user sync is running, because I know right at that time, that's my LDAP that's processing. The pending the email addresses. This is why are these emails hung up? I look at this and 9 times out of 10, it's a bad email address. And we have it set up to clear out after 7 days anyway, but I'm like I said, I love stats, but I don't like to see numbers in here. So I delete them. But it does, when I do go into it, I do see some failed emails. Very rarely, but I will see some failed emails coming in because somebody sent it to the wrong place and the system didn't know what to do with it. Anybody use the statistic form? BMC does. If you're in Helix, they have it on all the time. So this is where you can look at APIs, how many filters are running during the time period, things like that, how many users are logging in. It gives you a lot of numeric values. I cannot turn it off because I have almost 10 million records in my environment right now because BMC has it turned on and it runs. It spits out every minute all the different field or stats that it's running, as well as the overall. So when you multiply, I think it's like what, 7? It's like 7 of those entries every minute. That adds up, and then it starts filling up. But again, you can run reports off of this to see where your heavy hitters are. You can also find out how often or how many people are logging in. Again, looking at your peak performance hours, looking at when your users are in the system, when you're looking at when they're going to start dealing with calls and when you're going to start seeing slownesses. Over here, I ran this from 7 to 8. And as I said, my users don't come in until what, 8 to 9. How do I know that? I ran this log. I ran this statistic. And I can see it started at 2 at the bottom at the beginning of 7 o'clock, worked its way up to 6. The internet is unstable. That's not good. And then the next hour, it got up as high as 18, 19 people registered. So that's how I knew that people were coming in. Now, this is a shipping company, so I kind of figured that they're probably doing their orders or whatever, and then they come into RMI and deal with tickets in that capacity. This is the service level management measuring device. This is where I did a search for how many records they had pending, and it was 694. And then that's when I started doing searches and saying, look, you have 694 of these open tickets that are pending, and they go back to 2020. Why don't you close them? Well, people like to keep them. Well, they can't see them anymore. They can't see them because what I said, it's only 30 days. Well, let's make it where they can see. So now I have to adjust the performance on the ticket console so they can see these old tickets that should be closed. And especially if you look at it. And then once you look at the records that are actually resolved, I can show them the overall end result of what is the average. So now I have all these in seconds, and you can see I have 100,940 service targets that met the request-based type of incident that we used. So they can see how many actually were met, but then they can also see how many weren't met. But the problem is my stats are flawed. We imported over 100,000 records from an old system, and all SLAs were met. So now when you look at it, I really only had 940 that were met, not 100,940. So when I showed them this, I'm like, don't get fooled by this stat, okay? Because of that initial input. So people, you have to validate the data, okay? So key point, best practice, business process. Get your business processes airtight. You've got to have the data valid. You've got to have the right information. So look to see what you're doing, how you're doing it, and see how you can improve on it. And make sure that that data is incorporated in the right place. How are they starting it? How are they ending it? So make sure you define the right process. Make sure that your process is clear to all the end users, because if it's not clear to them, you're not going to get the right information that's going to come across into that perspective for them. So, for example, the summary field. Do you guys have your naming conventions for summary, or can people just put whatever they want to in the summary? Put anything you want to? My customer takes what is really called OPCAT tier 1, 2, and 3, merges them together, and that's their summary. It doesn't tell me anything about what's the ticket all about. So what I do is I change the summary and I put remedy first because I know it's a remedy issue, and then I put in whether it's a request or an issue in the actual summary. So I am consistent with mine, and I'm trying to do it slowly by showing my boss, is this easier to read than it is to have the OPCAT tier 1, 2, and 3 in there to not know what the ticket's all about. And that's what some of his customers are asking, but he refuses to change the summary. So that's one of the things that came up in that aspect. I utilize the podcasts as much as possible because it allows me to do ticket assignment. It allows me to do approvals a lot easier. And the users don't even have to select it if I bring in business service. If they select a business service, it automatically fills in the podcasts. And the podcasts can then drive your approvals in that capacity and your ticket assignment in that aspect. Utilize, again, service, I already talked about that. What about owners on incident? Do you see the owner on an incident ticket in Smart IT? Do you look at the owner in your ITSM? Looking at the owners. The owners are flagged in the system. So when you create a ticket in Smart IT and you do not have it in the configuration assignment, it takes that person's default group and puts it in there. So you got to make sure your default groups are involved. Make sure that it's set up to the right group that they need to be in. Relate your CIs to all change requests. Change and configuration are supposed to go hand in hand. I deal with a lot of customers that do change management, but not CMDB. So how can you actually have a true change if you don't have a CI to relate to it? You got to have that true change functionality. And then have your agents don't set that into pending unless they absolutely are waiting for somebody to help out. Not just to stop the clock.
And that's exactly I've been in organizations where day one they say, "Here's our remedy system. When you get a ticket, put it in pending."
Yeah, that's why they
contracting scenario. So they're looking at their requirements for the contract, and the SLAs, meeting the SLAs. That was the focus, not so much service.
And the other thing is they don't assign the ticket to an agent. They leave it as assigned, and then they move it to resolve. And it's like, well, who did the work? Well, the only way you're going to know is how do you know who did the work? You have to look at the audit because you can see who changed stuff, and you can also look into the assignment log, the time spent. You can see that because they'll have their name that's on it, but you're not going to get it on the ticket, which is what my customer wants. I said, well, you've got to change your process and have them do that. And now they want to use that duplicate of and original of. They can't do it until they can change their process to sign the ticket to somebody, or it fails. And then I have to do it because it's in my log file, and I can't stand seeing that entry in the log file. So I have to go and fix it by assigning it to somebody. Another one is have a checklist periodically to evaluate their data. Yes, I am talking about performance tuning here. You still need to have a checklist to test out things. So in my production, every morning, I have a checklist of about 6 areas to go into. It takes me about 5 minutes just to make sure there's nothing going on. And I do the same thing in QA and Dev, but once a week, not once a day. And then, of course, consult with other agents to determine how they're using the stats, if they're using the stats, if it's useful, how they're filling out the information, why they're filling it out in certain ways. I mean, I got yelled at yesterday because I canceled the ticket on somebody because they didn't follow the process. And they said, well, you canceled my ticket, you should put it back in. It's like, no, you didn't follow the process. I'm not putting it in. So again, looking at the process, I had to tell him what he had to do in that aspect. So all he had to do was select from the menu, not type it in. So again, in that case, it was a learning curve. So this is more about stats. Keep on looking at the forms. You have a ton of forms that hold data. A lot of people don't even know the data is there to look at. You can do that. I actually created a form. I haven't put it in my 2008 environment, but it allows me to look at pulling the, everybody knows about the metadata forms, AR schema, things like that. I'll pull up AR schema to look at how many tickets it shows in that column, because I basically do a table to show everything, and I sort it on the number of tickets that are in there. It says next ticket or next ID, I look at that to see what's the next ID. And that kind of gives me an idea of how many records could be in it. Not an accurate one, because I don't know if people deleted records or skipped records, because you know you can skip records, right? Especially if you're basically having mid-tiers, you got 2 mid-tiers, and this one then crashes, and then you has to pick up another section of numbers. You're not going to have an accurate number, but at least I can see, oh, which one's getting close to 1 million records or 2 million or whatever. So that at least gives me an idea of what to look for. So you can build a table against the AR schema table to see which one has.
Have you seen LJ's APL toolbox tool? It has a record counting.
It doesn't.
So I use that, and that's where I go. I find my forms that have millions of records. I say, why? Start whittling that down, and then working it down for archiving and performance.
Yep. I mean, you got to monitor your system. So, and that's what I mainly do now. So before I didn't do it because I was an instructor, didn't have to. Now I do it because I'm a developer / administrator / consultant for a couple of companies, and I always put performance ahead, because if the customer's not happy and they're seeing its slowness and stuff like that, I don't have that issue. So, any questions at all about statistics? Yes. No? All right. Well, thank you for your time.